All right, we are live.
Hello.
I just unmuted Jeremy. I think he's still muted on his end. Jeremy, you're muted on your end somehow.
We've got some dadliest catching to do today.
How's that?
That works just
That's
fine.
better.
All right, perfect.
StreamYard did not pick the correct audio device.
I should probably check that for me. Let's see.
It
did not pick the right one for me either. It's using the wrong one.
All right, well, you switch to the right one and we'll see just how much better your audio sounds.
There we go.
Oh yeah, that is actually better.
Significantly better.
It was using this microphone rather than the big chunky microphone. Gotta love it.
So Jessica, I can't help but notice that you're not Mark Thompson. Kevin, you're not Mark Thompson either.
That's so
I'm
I've
not.
heard.
I'm not. Nor will I ever be, because no one can be a facsimile even of Mark Thompson.
So yeah, Mark is just off today, so the show must go on without him, and so Kevin is here, who also works on Angular DevRel to help us with our event production. Welcome.
Thank you. No, it's good to be here. I'll mostly be in the background, but if you all have any questions, I will draw attention to them so that Jessica and Jeremy can answer them and potentially also pop them up on screen.
So Jessica, what are you playing today?
Today, we are playing Octodad, Dadliest Catch. I didn't actually realize that this is a sequel to a game, I guess that was like a freemium or free game from a while back. But yeah, I've had this game for a while. I've played about 30 minutes of it, but I know it's silly and fun. So that's what we're playing.
Cool. I know Mark usually greets people in the chat, so I'm going to do that more efficiently by just saying hello, everyone in the chat.
For those that are unaware, the premise of this game is you are playing a dad who is an octopus, and he's wearing a disguise to look like a human and has convinced everyone that he is a human. So your goal is to continue that disguise and not be discovered that you are an octopus.
You're not even dressed. You're so presentable. She's waiting for you.
All right, so we have one question in the chat here, which is how to use Prettier with Angular, which I don't think there's anything special you need to do. It's just like whatever normal way you use Prettier, you use it in Angular. I don't know that there's anything special necessary. That was an easy one.
There's another easy one. Is this a game built with Angular?
Absolutely not. The kinds of games one might build with Angular are very basic browser-based games that, like Mark and I, we built Spades and Uno. You could do something like Minesweeper. I suppose there's nothing stopping you from trying to do a web GL thing with Angular, although I'll be the first to admit it's not designed for that, gang. Probably not gonna have a good time.
Okay, so this reminds me of what game? The surgeon game where the controls Surgery Simulator. Yeah, so all the controls are awkward. So right trigger moves the right leg, and left trigger is left leg, and yeah, independent control of certain behaviors with each stick. So this will be a little odd.
Oh, it was Surgeon Simulator 2013. Oh yeah, that was fun.
I think these games are all sort of inspired by QWOP, right? Those keyboard running games where you have to control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so we've got to get the door open. Oh, it goes that way.
There's a good question here in the chat. Is if you could go back in time and change anything about Angular, what would it be? Man, sometimes I lie in bed at night thinking about this. I could go on for a while. I think that where to start? I think probably the thing that sits most heavily on my mind is the use and existence of Zone.js by Angular. So Angular was always kind of developed with this idea that you just, you put your application state anywhere, right? You put it in properties, you can call functions in your template, just all plain JavaScript stuff, and it just works. And Angular uses Zone.js to run change detection every time something might have changed, which means that Angular checks for changes very often. And a lot of times it doesn't actually find anything that has changed because it is checking very aggressively. And this is kind of the key to Angular's magic, so to speak, in that what lets you just kind of like write your state wherever you want, however you want, deeply nest it, all that. But it comes with a really big cost. So Zone.js, it's like 40 kilobytes of JavaScript. It monkey patches a bunch of browser APIs. And that monkey patching is actually not the fastest thing in the world, right? Obviously, it's not brutalizing your load speed, but it's certainly not helping. And there's also just some native APIs now that it doesn't work with at all. So if you use native async await, there's no way for Zone.js to monkey patch that. And so Angular, as long as it relies on Zone.js, has to do some sort of down leveling for the native async await. So when you're writing those today in your actual code, even if you are targeting only the most modern of browsers, it's still getting down leveled to an older ECMAScript version for those specific APIs. And I think that if we had a magic wand and could go back in time and do something different, that would be the top of my list.
Where's the bow tie?
So what is your goal right now? You're just getting dressed?
Yes, I'm trying to find, the goal right now is to find the bow tie wherever it is so that I can go in and get married, but...
Yes. And the Octodad cannot speak, right?
No, not well, at least there's no controls for that, I think. Okay, so we've it's not in the flowers.
All right. Let's see here. There's a question here about a place to find Angular job postings. We're the worst people to ask for that. We, being the ones who work on it, we have very little experience looking for jobs. So maybe other folks in the chat have suggestions there. Let's see. What else do we have? Mark is better at working the chat than I am.
There's a question about using async await and converting observables to promises when working with HTTP client. Is that a good recommendation?
Do you have any thoughts about using async await, converting observable to promises when working with HTTP client? I don't think there's really there's not a good or a bad here, at least from Angular's perspective. This is really, I think, maybe more of an RxJS question. So I know RxJS experts generally advocate against converting observables to promises. But in the case of HTTP client, when you know that your request is going to come back with exactly one response, you are probably going to be fine. And I think the main reason that HTTP client even uses observables in the first place is only for instances, it uses them all the time, but it's only really necessary for instances when you are streaming. So if you're using like a WebSocket and streaming responses from the server, then that observable really makes sense. But in cases where you're just making a single request response, then there's really nothing, there's no big deal with just getting a promise out of that. If the rest of your application is not using observables for everything, and you don't just want to like take that observable and plug it into another one somewhere else to flow it into some other state.
All right, we've got success. Time to knock over some of these gifts.
It's also a really weird place to leave gifts, just like in a random corridor on the ground.
Do we want the hat? Can we put the hat on? Yes. Oh, yes, we can. All right, cool.
She's marrying him. Doesn't he seem a little...
Oh, no.
I bet it's really fun for the developers making this game to be like, how much stuff can we just put for you to knock over on your way?
Slip on literal banana peels.
Let's see.
I knew you
Someone asked here, will there ever be an official way to lazy load components other than on route change? So you can actually do this today already. This is very possible. We just don't have a like singular API to do it, but you can use a dynamic import to load a component and then like just render it in like a view container ref, and that should just work. I think there's some like third-party npm packages, blanking on the name. I think one of them is like Lazy AF is the name of one of them, for making it a little bit smoother so you could like do it in a template, but it's very doable today just using a plain old JavaScript dynamic import. That said, we would like to someday make it so that it's easier to declaratively lazy load something from a template context, but we don't have any plans to do that in the super immediate future. It's not something we're actively working on, but it is definitely an item in the backlog.
Oh, I couldn't grab any of those.
What else you got? Oh, are you grabbing the credits?
I'm trying to. It won't let me grab them, but I can move the character around while we're doing this.
I like when games do something interesting with the credits. Like I've always enjoyed the like Super Smash. The Super Smash Brothers is the thing that has gotten me to pay attention to credits more than anything else, because it turns into like a little arcade shooter mini game. All right, let's see. Let's ask some other questions. There's a question here from Ratik. I think, is it good in practice to use fetch sometimes instead of HTTP client? It's really up to you about what makes sense for your application. HTTP client provides some additional functionality on top of the basic fetch. So if you do want observables out of your client, then yeah, HTTP client is great for that. I think probably the best advantage for HTTP client is the testing support. So it's really easy to use HTTP testing module from Angular so that you can stub out or fake out whatever data you want for your HTTP requests in your tests. So that for that reason alone, I would probably use HTTP client in anything I was building, unless it was super trivial and I wasn't even writing tests. But if you are in a situation where fetch meets all of your needs, then there's nothing wrong with using that directly. Let's see. Let's see. There's a question here from Yusef. Does the Angular team plan in the future to get back into the throne of web frameworks? I think this, we don't really think about it this way, right? Like our approach to like existing in the web ecosystem has been, we're always just trying to build the best web framework we can, like, and do the best by our current customers and build something that we think is genuinely helping people build web applications easier. It is not our goal to be like the most popular or the most widely used web framework, right? If those things happen, great. But like definitely we see all of the other web frameworks and all of the other innovation in the ecosystem for, you know, Vue and Svelte and Solid and Astro and, you know, 50 other things every other day. But Mark and I and Jessica, I'm assuming you're on the same page. As we always say, it's like they're all good. Everything is good. Like they're all great for their own things and for people's different preferences. So
yeah, I think there's I think this is public, like available content. But I was at JamstackConf. When was it? November or December last year, and specifically was on a panel about this exact thing. And that's exactly how I discussed it as well. As we're not interested in the so-called framework wars, and we actually chat with all of the other framework creators too. Like we do that pretty regularly. So we pretty much feel that there is a solution for everyone, and that our goal is to make something that's good and usable and that people are happy with, and that's essentially it. We're glad that people find usefulness in our framework and other frameworks.
Yeah. All right, what else we got here? I wish I had a way to like just check off things in the chat. Like, yeah, I answered that one. Let's see. Ivan asks, can I create a directive that will unsubscribe when the component is destroyed and do so as a host directive? Probably. I think I saw somebody do something like that. So let's see, what could you do? You could create a host directive that has a destroyed subject, and that emits on it when the destroyed subject completes. And I guess that directive could probably also inject the components and call stuff on the component if you needed to. I think what you're describing is probably possible, but I would have to sit down and try it out to know for sure. Let's see.
There was a question asking if Mark could wish Rosa a happy birthday. Unfortunately, Mark is not here today, but happy birthday, Rosa, from all of us.
Yes. Happy birthday to Andy Todd's friend Rosa, which if you want Mark to actually do it, it's going to be very late. Let's see. I saw a couple of questions about like standalone components of like, how do we feel they're going, or when are we going to change the default? We don't have any answer for that yet. We think they're going pretty well. We are trying to nudge more teams to use them inside of Google. And we are probably going to change it so that when you generate a new Angular application with Angular CLI, it will use standalone by default. But we still don't have a time frame for like when will like standalone be. I don't even know, like beyond just being the default for a new app, right? Like,
What if they were made from ponies?
I guess like the longer term, right, many year question is like, will ng modules ever go away? And we just don't have an answer for that yet. I think what we've said before is we're going to see how it goes, right? See how the adoption of standalone components picks up, and base any decisions we make on that over time. So I think it's a little just too early to tell. But yeah, I like standalone components. If I was writing a new Angular app, I would use standalone components. And that's what we're telling all of our Google teams too, is if you're writing a new app, use standalone components.
Yeah, speaking of Google teams using Angular, there are a few questions about which products at Google use Angular.
All right. I'm only going to talk about public-facing products because you would be able to figure these out anyway, right? If you went to the site and you opened up Chrome DevTools and you looked at the, the DOM, you would be able to tell like immediately whether or not something is using Angular. There's a lot of Google internal tools that are using Angular that maybe I can kind of mention obliquely, but not by name. So the biggest by far Angular application, maybe anywhere, is Google Cloud Developer Console. So if you use Google Cloud, then any of your administration or setup or anything like that is a super massive Angular app. And Google Domains is an Angular app. Messages for Web is an Angular app. There's more. I'm having a hard time remembering them. I think the new like Google Home app is an Angular app. So if you, what's that URL? Like home.google.com maybe? What is that? Yeah, so if you use like Nest smart home devices, you kind of like can look at all that stuff at home.google.com, and that's an Angular app. I know there's a ton I'm not thinking of. Google Voice, Angular app. Google Analytics.
This is hard.
What is your goal right now, Jessica? You're
I'm weeding the garden.
Okay. The little, what's it called? The lower third, the bar is covering up your objective in the game.
Aha. Yeah, if I step on any of the flowers, it makes my wife unhappy. Okay, we've got one more weed, I think.
Yeah,
I
someone in
be
the chat
okay
said
here.
Google Keep. They think Google Keep uses Angular. I don't think that's true. They've never been on our radar, and all of the the Google Workspace apps they're all using a separate thing. There's more. I'm just like, I can't remember any off the top of my head, and there's a lot of internal non-public facing apps inside of Google that are using Angular. A lot of kind of just businessy stuff. And a lot of our developer tooling is also using Angular. So inside of Google, our code review tool, our source code viewer, our task, project tracker kind of thing, Google's bug tracker, all of these things are Angular apps.
This is how you mow a lawn.
I shortened the title of that window a little bit, so now everybody can see.
Cool. So I have a lawnmower like this, and I like it. Y'all ever used a non-motorized lawnmower like this?
I had one
I
when
have
I was
never.
a kid. Yeah, we had one. It was bright yellow.
I've got one because I have a lawn here which is pretty small, and so it's reasonable for me to do it. But I always just kind of do a half-hearted job where I'll just I build up a little speed and I'll run. I take a run at the grass and try to run through it in one pass, and I'll go back and forth a few times. And there's some patches where I missed. I'm just good enough. I'll get it the next go around.
I'm sure you control your lawnmower just as well as I do here, so...
Yeah, I'm marginally more confident with it than this.
I had a big lawn when I was a kid, so I don't know if I could have mowed my lawn faster than you, but I did have a lot more to mow.
All right, let's see. We see somebody, Michael Faith here, commenting that they're looking forward to the self-closing tag update in 15.1. Yeah, that's a nice little small feature that's landing in 15.1 probably, that for now, for components, you don't need to put an open and a close tag anymore. You can just make component tags self-closing if you don't need to put anything in them inside, obviously. And this is a really interesting one because it actually is, I think, the first decision we've made to maybe more formally do something that is not 100% compatible, 100% valid HTML as per the specification. And I think it's an important milestone for us to kind of acknowledge that Angular templates are not strictly HTML. And so the thing a lot of people maybe don't realize when they are writing Angular templates is that those HTML files are never served to or seen by the browser. Those templates are compiled on as part of your build, and turned into a bunch of JavaScript instructions that are under the hood, right? It's just calling like document.createElement, div, document.setAttribute, class, blah, 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 right? It's just like, it's all JavaScript instructions that's doing that. So the very idea of HTML validity is meant for HTML files coming from a web server that then the browser looks at. And you generally do want your HTML files to be valid HTML because you want browsers to render them in a predictable way. But because Angular templates are never seen by a browser and they're just the authoring format, having them be valid HTML doesn't really do anything for you. There is maybe there's a consideration we have for third-party tools like parsers that might want to look at Angular templates and do stuff with them. And that's just generally something that's kind of impossible for us to support, right? We have our own parser for HTML, the Angular's HTML templates, and we use that to do all of our own code transformations and what have you. And it's not really possible for us to avoid making any changes to the template format that might potentially affect third-party parsers, because it would just be too restrictive for us and prevent us from making kind of any changes or evolutions to the authoring tool. Cool. Let's see what else we got in here. Yusuf in here says, can you talk more about ng source? So I can actually recommend a YouTube video about this. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's gonna be Carrot's talk from ngconf. Can I find this? There's an ngconf talk about the optimized image directive. ng optimized image is the name.
Has revolutionized the modern shopping experience. Everything here is
Can I find it?
and handled remotely.
Can anybody else on the chat find it before I do? Yeah, I can't find the link right now, but it's probably up there somewhere. But yeah, Kara Erickson from the Chrome Aurora team gave a talk at ngconf about ng optimized image. That's the name of the directive. The one little catch is that during ngconf, the name of the input was it was raw source, and shortly after that talk, in part because of a car ride I had with Kara after the event, we decided to change it to ng source, which we think was just a little bit more clear that it was an Angular API and not a native image attribute. So we actually we got some feedback after the event that people were actually unclear, that they thought raw source was just something that was on the native image. And so by changing it to ng source, we made it more obvious that this is something that's coming from Angular. But the idea of it is that you use ng source instead of source on an image, and that will use the ng optimized image directive under the hood and perform a bunch of image optimization best practices to help your core web vitals. So yeah, definitely good. And you can find more about the documentation of it on angular.io, so go check that out.
So I think I need to go in that door and find a way back over here to the frozen pizza, but I'm not exactly sure how to do it. So we'll see.
So I need to find a frozen pizza. Is it... Wait, you have to be in the freezer case?
None of the doors work.
They're all frozen shut.
Yeah, something like that. So, but I can't figure out if nope, I don't want to grab that. If I have to like somehow climb. Like, yeah.
I feel like you should be able to just like writhe your way through the shelves.
Yeah, it's tough to say if that's what I'm supposed to do. There's nothing to grab onto to like help climb better. So I'm confused. Oh, maybe we've got this. There we go. Okay.
All right, so let's go looking for more chat questions here. Oh yeah, someone pointed out Google Fonts uses Angular. That's true, they do. So does Material.io.
Oh my.
Firebase console, yep, absolutely. Firebase. Sometimes I accidentally I'm like, oh yeah, Firebase is also part of like Google Cloud, but that's actually like it's its own separate product. Let's see. So Aaron Yankee asks here, where can I find documentation on the Ivy compiler and how can we get involved with it? So there is no Ivy compiler anymore, at least nominally, right? So ever since Angular version 13, it's just the Angular compiler now. The whole distinction of like Ivy or not Ivy is no longer necessary because we got rid of the thing that existed before Ivy, and so now everything is just Angular now. So, and in terms of how to get involved, it depends on what you want to do. If you are interested in contributing to Angular, I believe we have some contributor docs on GitHub, so go check those out, and you can get involved in issue discussions or what have you on GitHub too, as a first step to trying to get involved. Let's see. Nia asks here, since Alex is working on it says here the new template pipeline. Does that mean we're going to get new syntax features soon? The work that Alex is doing right now is just kind of a big refactoring on Angular's template definition builder, which is, without getting too deep, right? It's just a big implementation detail of how Angular parses and processes templates. And right now it is kind of in need of some code cleanup. It is very, it was written in a way that was like very tailored to a certain way of doing things with during the development of Ivy. And now Alex is just going through and doing some cleanup. This isn't a sign that we are like imminently going to be adding or changing the template syntax in any way. It's just kind of something that cleans up some code so that we are able to more easily make changes in the future when we want to. But definitely, yeah, you mentioned arrow functions and templates, or using constants that are in the lexical scope of the template without needing to put them on the class. Those are all things that we definitely know, like those are things people have been asking for a long time, including myself. The GitHub feature request for arrow functions was originally opened by me, I think back in 2015 when I first joined the team, and I still want it, so it's definitely on our radar, but again, like not something that you'll probably see in the immediate future, but still hanging out on the backlog. We've got tons of competing priorities, and so we're always trying to just pick the thing that we think is going to be the most impactful.
Promote family values by offering great values to great families.
Let's see. Does the team have any interest in the possibilities for Angular with technologies like Bun.js? It seems to perform much faster than Node. React already seems to kind of work with it as per docs. Honestly, I don't know that anyone on the team has really taken a look at this yet. My sense is that it's probably just a little early. Yeah, I think I don't really have a more satisfying answer than that. It's probably like too early to tell, and we'd have to see if things pick up a little bit more traction first, or if more people start asking for it. That's usually one of the best signals for us that we should do something, is that people start, filing more GitHub issues about it and voting on those issues.
See, when the red light's on, the speaker is off. That means it's safe for me to talk about how we get our meat from.
Let's see, what else we got here? Any plans on improving / simplifying Universal, or doing something like integrating SSR into CLI itself? It's funny you ask.
Yeah, very funny you ask.
we have, that is one of the projects we're prioritizing for 2023, is doing a bunch of work to improve the overall experience of Angular Universal. I don't have any specifics to share on that right now, but a decent chunk of effort is going to be dedicated towards improving that Angular Universal experience this year. I haven't asked, what is better to use constructor or inject function for dependency injection? I don't know if I should make a... Actually, no. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Use the inject function. It's better.
Agree.
It is better than constructor injection, and you should just use the inject function. That's not to say that we're going to like imminently remove constructor injection, but I do... This is not an official announcement or a formal...
Oh no!
That, but I expect us to migrate people away from constructor injection eventually. And the key driving factor to that is that the ECMAScript decorators proposal, which has advanced pre-car, does not include parameter decorators. It has class decorators and it has member decorators. But it does not have parameter decorators, which we currently use for things like add inject, add optional, self, skip self, post. And those things wouldn't be valid like ECMAScript, which isn't to say that like we would need to switch away from them, because we're obviously still using TypeScript and we have our own compilation toolchain and we could do whatever transformation we need to, but we really don't want to be in a world where like Angular decorators are a different thing than the standard JavaScript decorators people are using elsewhere. We would very much want to align with the standards, and so for that reason, like foremost, we would probably see ourselves moving away from constructor injection eventually and preferring the inject function.
This is tough.
What else do we got here?
Get away from free sushi samples in the back.
Let's see, someone here asked about, can you talk a little bit more about type narrowing with ng switch? Not very usefully. So right now, Angular does have a pretty sophisticated template type checking system, but one of its limitations is that it can't really, how do I explain this? The problem with ng switch is that like switch and case are separate directives, and there's not a great mechanism for them to coordinate on their type information. There is an idea floating around on the team for how to improve this, but it's not something that has been super prioritized yet. If you go looking through GitHub issues, you can probably find some more useful conversation on this. I'm not the most technically up to speed on the template type checking, so I'm not going to be able to give you the deepest explanation of why it's hard today. Let's see. Did I miss anything higher up? Talk about that.
Ah, missed it.
Let's see, there's a question here about if you have an observable that you don't use in a template, what about adding a reference to it in your template to unsubscribe to it manually? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it if I was writing something, because I think it's I would think of this as something called spooky action at a distance, which is you're using this observable in your code, and you can look at all the places in your code that's using it and then see like, oh, this is not getting unsubscribed anywhere, but actually it's getting unsubscribed because of this thing in the template. And this thing in the template is also not really used anywhere. You're kind of creating extra stuff when you probably should just unsubscribe from it in your code.
Ooh, take a look at that.
Let's see. Are there any plans to allow multiple structural directives on the same element? No. I don't even know how that would work. Because the way structural directives work is it's basically a syntax trigger for an ng template element, and
Are you all right? What has got you so spooked?
the structural directive then can get a reference to that ng template element and do stuff with it. And if you had multiple structural directives on the same thing, then they're both competing for like ownership of that template and what happens to it. And there's not really a way where you can chain multiple like operations on an ng template, right? So you wouldn't have a super easy time to like chain. Let's say you wanted to like do an ng if and an ng for, right? Like both of those things are going to be like, all right, I've got a template, I'm going to do this with it, and they're going to conflict with each other. Maybe an easier thing to do is to just like have a custom directive that delegates to the behavior of like what would be other directives normally. So if you wanted something that worked as just as an example, like as both an ng if and an ng for, creating a custom directive that kind of encompasses both of those behaviors.
Hey, get back in line.
Ooh, Alex Brown asking an interesting question. If you had to use a different framework to make docs pages for Angular, what would you choose? There's a lot of reasonable answers here. So like something like Eleventy is a nice option because it's like just for static sites, and Angular IO is mostly a static site, but it does have some interactivity to it. Like it's got a version picker, it's got, you know, map and stuff like that, theme swapper. I personally like Svelte a lot. I think Svelte takes the problem space of web development and divides it into very similar problem spaces as Angular does. And for that reason, it appeals to me. If there's a reason I can't use Angular.
You always say that.
But yeah, they're like we said earlier, they're all good. Everything's good. All right. I haven't been paying attention to the game for a while.
Right now, we're going to an aquarium, and there's marine biologists here, and I have to avoid being seen by them because they know a fish when they see one. I've already gotten my ticket.
Are there any octopuses in the shop? The like little stuffed ones?
Oh, I didn't see. I'd have to go look.
It's very high security for an aquarium.
Oh, gotta go this way to avoid the marine biologist.
Let's see. There's a question here. Do standalone components get bundled as a single file separate from the main bundle? Can you lazy load them besides route changes? So being standalone or not has nothing to do with how a component is bundled. If you reference like any JavaScript file or TypeScript file in your like main bundle, then that is also going to get included in your main bundle. If you, instead of referencing it directly, you use a dynamic import, then that will get generated as a separate chunk, so to speak, or what's the Webpack term? Is it like, I forget the term Webpack uses for.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Can we talk?
But yeah, like effectively it'll be like a different chunk of JavaScript that can be loaded lazily. And like I mentioned earlier, you can today lazy load components by using dynamic import and then just loading them like you would in your code normally with like a few container ref.
I thought the aquarium was more
Let's see. There's a question here that has some Unicode characters that are not showing up on my machine, at least. It says, "What do you think about directly bound values to inputs? For example, my component." And then square braces on the value. I don't actually understand what this is doing. This is like a binding on value without the right-hand side? Is that what you're asking about?
And you brush them off like they're nothing. Like when your foot got caught in the ceiling fan, or when we ran out of printer ink and you just made more. And I keep buying you toothbrushes and then finding them in the trash.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the question is there, but if there is a way for you to use property binding in an Angular template and then omit the right-hand side, I don't know about that, and I probably wouldn't do it. Ooh, can you play basketball, Jessica?
Yes, let's go do that.
Fixing the sink and the disposal came on, but you wouldn't go to the hospital, yet somehow your arm looks good as new. Are you ever going to explain that?
This is hilarious. The questions that is being asked.
Stacy would be so happy if she could see you. You know,
Oh,
she thinks
let's
you
see.
hate dolphins.
I think maybe the goal will be to...
Just dunk it.
Yeah, there's one.
I feel like this could be a speedrunning category, is first to like 10 basketball goals. Or fastest to 10 basketball goals.
Oh, went the wrong way. 4, 5.
Let's see, what else we got here?
Success.
I thought I saw a question about CSS, but now I don't see it anymore.
I saw someone comment that I know is an old college friend, so hello.
I don't
Thanks for joining.
get it. You love the ocean, but you seem to hate the aquarium.
Let's see. Someone asked, have you ever used ngneat/spectator library? I have never heard of it. Let's look it up. Let's look it up right now. What the deal? This is so... Okay, this is a whole org. Okay, this is probably more than I can internalize during the live stream. Looks like a testing helper library, though. I don't know. I'll check it out.
Oh,
I'll leave the
fail.
tab open.
Try again.
Let's
No
see.
surprise, hard to control.
We have a question here. Any possibility of code splitting CSS to CSS module import API to lazy load styles for lazy loading modules? So in Angular today, your CSS participates in the JavaScript module graph by being in a component's style URLs. So, say you have a component,
Terrible.
you have some styles for that component. Angular will take that CSS and inline it into that component's JavaScript so that it is always loaded along with that component. So as long as you are encapsulating your styles with each, not encapsulating is not the right word, but like associating your styles with the component that use them, you don't need to do anything extra in order to only load the styles when that component loads, right? We're not loading all of your CSS as global styles. Only the styles you put in your global styles file, which is currently called like styles.css or SCSS. Those are global, but for component-specific styles, those are lazy loaded along with the component. So as long as you are using that component as the building block of your app and putting the styles where they belong associated with those components, the lazy loading stuff will all just work.
Gotta get the timing right on this, which I continue to not do.
It's like Plinko.
Yeah.
Can you just like DDoS it and just like throw
Right?
all the balls in there?
It's just the hard part of like getting the angles right. I need to literally step up.
Oh, yes. Okay, so there is a question here about...
Ooh, I got it.
Nice. Ooh, it's a frog. There's a question here about Vite with Angular. So right now, we are mostly just drawing inspiration from Vite in terms of how we might make Angular's developer experience like a little bit faster. The reason Angular can't work with Vite directly is because Vite works on this concept of one-to-one file transformations. So basically, when you change a source file, the only thing that needs to change in the browser is the one corresponding file to that source file. Angular just doesn't work that way today because of engine modules. And because of this like indirection, right? Like you can make a change in a file and you kind of need to do a, like not global, but a like a less local compilation, right? Your unit of compilation is slightly larger. That doesn't exactly work with the architecture of Vite today. So while we are definitely always working to make the Angular build process, faster, like we're currently working on, this experimental ES build integration for Angular CLI as one avenue of that. That like direct integration with Vite isn't something that's really an option for us today. There's a question from Bodo. Is there a plan to add a time picker in Angular material? We know that this is really highly in demand, but it's not something that we plan on doing anytime soon, for a couple of reasons. One is that it's not one of the like core set of material design components. And, we do have some components that aren't in material design today, like, Stepper. Although there was a time in the past when Stepper was in the material design spec, which is when we built it. But also, we are focusing a little bit more now on the code side on working towards update to material design itself. So you've probably seen like M3 out there, material design 3. That's something we hope to be able to support relatively soon, sometime this year, maybe. That has some dependencies on some things outside of our control, though. And we are also wanting to work on more CDK primitives. So one of the things that's on our shortlist is a CDK combo box. And the really exciting thing about CDK combo box is that it would make it very easy for you to make your own custom time picker, because we think that most time picker interactions are just going to follow the combo box pattern. And rather than trying to just invent one time picker user experience that tries to work for everyone, we can just give you the CDK primitives, and you can use those to compose a time picker that works best for your context, and it should still be a relatively small amount of work.
But when we're talking about us, you clam up.
That was a great pun.
All right, you've got this, Jessica. I'm very intrigued by the like existential questions of this game, of like, does the Octodad, like, is Octodad happy? Right? Do they want to live life as a human?
That's a good question. Do they want to lie to everyone all the time? Okay.
Let's see. Maybe we have time for like one more question. We only have like 5 minutes left. And I think this very last one I see here coming in is somewhat of a larger question. So that Joel here asks, is there something like Next.js in Angular? And it's a complicated question. So generally the term we use for things like Next.js and Nuxt and SculptKit is a meta framework. And there's no dictionary definition for a meta framework, but I personally would define it as a web development solution that takes a web server framework and a web browser client framework and creates a model, a framework for building an application that tightly integrates those two things together. So in the case of Next.js, for example, they have, actually I should say production web server, and not just a development server. So they have a production web server, they have a client-side framework, which is React, and then they have a number of features that are built on top of the integration of those two things. Such as like the server-side rendering and the file-based routing and all that stuff. And when we talk about Angular, we're kind of in a middle ground because, obviously Angular is a client-side browser framework, and we don't provide a production web server kind of by default. Although Angular Universal is, available as an option for doing some web serving stuff and server-side rendering. But Angular CLI does also provide kind of a build system and a test runner and, lints and things like that. And so we are kind of in this middle ground between just being a pure client-side web framework where something like Svelte, right? Which is like very much focused on just being that part of this thing. And then the meta framework part, which is like the whole thing end to end. And I think you could get into some conversations that debate like what is strictly necessary for a meta framework or not. So one of the most commonly accepted features of meta frameworks out there is the file-based routing, which we don't do in Angular, and I think it's debatable whether or not that would be a requirement to call something a meta framework. In my view, it's not a requirement. I think it's really just that kind of integration of features between the client and the server that is really the crux of it. And those integrations, like, it's server-side rendering, it can be static site integration, it can be static site rendering, it can be hydration or granular hydration, fine-grained hydration, whatever you want to call it.
I bet you don't.
And really just like imagination's the limit on the type of integrations you can have there. And so while we don't have plans to like put out like, a product that is like, here is the Angular meta framework, we're always working on things to improve the like functionality of like Angular and the integrations it has with Angular CLI and DevTools and Angular Universal. And like I already mentioned early in the stream, we are working on, we're dedicating a fair amount of effort to improving the experience with Angular Universal this year. So you could interpret that as being like kind of meta frameworky, but it's not really our intent to say like, oh, look, like there's an Angular meta framework now because we did some stuff with server-side rendering.
Jellyfish can live forever.
So with that, I think that we are out of time. We got about a minute left, but we can start to wrap up.
Yeah, I suppose I can like hold off on playing for the rest of the time, but this is certainly a silly fun game.
Oh, look, and just in time, we have some spam in the chat.
By the way, this is not an advertisement, but if you're interested in this game, I think it's actually on sale on Steam right now. It's pretty fun.
All right, so with that, we'll sign off. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll be back again next month.
It was great to see everybody.
Same Angular channel.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
End broadcast.